Sekarang rekaman ini.
Iya, buat short saja.
So I was thinking, we start out with a namaskar to so
Yeah.
I should do that with you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start out like
Okay.
this, and then once it's done, then I
Then-
go and sit down.
Okay, thank you about that. Sure.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, in 1 minute. This is Julius. The audience is already here. 1 menit lagi ya? 45. Okay, you guys ready? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, recording.
Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Selamat datang, selamat bertemu lagi bersama kami, keluarga Buddhis Indonesia New York, dalam rangka puja bakti hari Minggu. Kembali hari ini kita akan diberikan dhamma di sana oleh Yang Mulia Bante Jayasaro. Puja bakti pada hari ini akan kami mulai dengan namakara, kemudian wandana, dan dilanjutkan dengan permohonan Pancasila dan Tisarana kepada Yang Mulia Bante. Kemudian dilanjutkan lagi dengan permohonan dhamma di sana. Baik, saya sudah menunjukkan 945. Kita mulai dulu dengan namakara patah. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagawa Buddhang Bhagawantang Abhiwademi. Sang Bhagawa yang Maha Suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna, aku bersujud di hadapan Sang Buddha, Sang Bhagawa. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Dhamma telah sempurna dipaparkan oleh Sang Bhagawa. Aku bersujud di hadapan Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Sangha siswa Sang Bhagawa telah bertindak sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sangha. So we're gonna give you respect first, okay? Marilah kita memberikan hormat puja kepada Yang Mulia Bante. Okasa Wandami Bante. Marilah kita mengucapkan penghormatan pendahuluan kepada kepada sama Sang Buddha. Handamayang Buddhasa Bhagavato Pupapagana Makarang Karomase. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Terpujilah Sang Bhagawa yang maha suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna. Terpujilah Sang Bagawa, yang maha suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna. Terpujilah Sang Bagawa, yang maha suci, yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna. Selanjutnya marilah kita membacakan kaidah permohonan Pancasila dan Sisarana. Let's recite Pancasila Aradhana. Okasa ahang bante tisaranena sading Pancasila dhammang yacami anugahang katwa silang detame bante dutiyampi okasa ahang bante tisaranena sading Pancasila dhammang yacami anugahang katwa silang detame bante tatiyampi okasa ahang bante tisaranena sading Pancasila dhammang yacami anugahang katwa silang detame bante
Yamahang vedami tang vedeta.
ama bante
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami
Tisarana gamanang sampurnam.
Amma bhante
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami
Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami
Kamesu micchāchāra veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musawada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami
Sura meriya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya Majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami
Tisuranena sajing panchasilang dhammang samadhiyatva sadhukang surakitang katva pamadena sampadittavang.
Amma bante.
Silena sugating yanti, silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbuting yanti, tasma silam visodaye.
Amma bante. Satu, satu, satu. Selanjutnya marilah kita membacakan Dhammadesana Aradhana. And next we're gonna recite Dhammadesana Aradhana. Brahma Caloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Antiwarang Ayacata Santi Dasata Paraja Kajatika Dese tu Dhammang Anukampimang Pajang.
Good morning or evening, friends, depending on where you are. Today's topic is a very, very, very important topic. This topic is called Kalyana Mitta. We're all maybe familiar with this term, right? This is a term that's often spoken about in Buddhist circles. And I think it warrants a talk, right? Actually, I've never given a talk specifically only on Kalyana Mitta, so we'll see how this goes. But it's so important that it deserves to be talked about more. So first let's go with the Pali. Let's understand the Kalyana is somebody who lives virtuously, lives skillfully, right? Acts skillfully in the world. Is a person who is not a bala, a fool. Right? We'll talk about bala later. But so the Kalyana is somebody who lives skillfully, follows virtuous precepts, right? Acts skillfully in the world, tries to act in ways that are beneficial to themselves and others and not harmful to themselves and others. That's Kalyana. Mitta is friend, right? So, or the act of being in a friendship. So Kalyana Mitta is somebody who is close to you, who is very skillful, very wise, right? Acts very skillful, is somebody worth emulating. Right? And so we see in the sutta, a very famous sutta, where Ananda, you know Ananda, the Buddha's chief attendant in the second half of his teaching career. Ananda is quite an interesting character because in many times in the suttas, Ananda will come up with a statement or will say something, and the Buddha has to gently reprimand him and says, "No, Ananda, don't say that." Right? And one of those is with Kalyana Mitta. So the Buddha, the sutta opens with Ananda coming to the Buddha and saying, "This is half the holy life." Kalyana Mitta, good friendship, good camaraderie, good companionship. Right, and the Buddha says, "No, Ananda." He says, "No." He says, "This is the whole of the holy life." For one who has good Kalyana Mitta, one who has good, virtuous friends, is expected to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? Is expected to act skillfully. Is expected to reach the ending of suffering. Right? So when it comes to monastics, in this regard, right, because this is what they're talking about when the whole of the holy life, it's very important for monastics to have good Kalyana Mitta. But it's also very important for lay people to have good Kalyana Mitta. So it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a lay person or if you're a monastic, having good Kalyana Mitta, good virtuous friends, right, is very important. Because if you don't, then it's very hard, or the chances are very unlikely that you are going to follow the path, that you are going to act skillfully. Right? Sure, there are the rare person in the world who has very strong determination and strong ability to act skillfully in skillful ways, totally and completely by themselves. Right? That person does exist. But for the rest of us, what we need in our lives is good Kalyana Mitta. This is very important. In the Buddha, when it comes to lay people, right, there's a sutta where the Buddha explains Kalyana Mitta in terms of lay people. He says there are people in the village who are well practiced in faith, well practiced in generosity, well practiced in developing in sila, right? Well practiced in pana. So saddha, sila, dana, panya, right? Those are the type of people that you should be around. Those are the type of people who you should emulate, right? People who are well versed, well practiced in these things, right? And not only people who talk the talk about them, whether monks or lay people, you can hear people, there could be even a monk. They could talk about, practicing good sila and good dana and good this. But then you watch them outside and it's like, they're not really practicing what they preach, right? They're not really walking the walk, as we say here in America, right? So we have to make sure that when we see somebody, a monastic or a lay person, etc., we say, okay, not only are they talking the talk, but they're walking the walk. This is a person who I should emulate. This is a person who I should look up to. This is a person who I should spend more time with. Right? This is a person who I can learn from. And you say, okay, I'm going to stick to this person like glue. Right? This is very important, right? The Buddha says that if you are in the company of a foolish person, then there's no companionship with a foolish person. Avoid them, right? That doesn't mean that you should hate them or not have metta for them, but just don't be around them, right? And if you cannot find such a person as I've described, a good Kalyana Mitta, it's better to be alone. Like the Buddha says, it's better to walk alone like an elephant through the forest. Right? But if you find such a good person, a person that's skilled in dana, sila, saddha, panya, right? Who's skilled in these things, then you should hold on to them and do what you can to be around them, right? To be around them. And this is important because, I don't know, I'm sure this is pretty universal. My major in college was anthropology. I love studying human cultures and cultures all over the world. And there are just some things that are universal. And I'm willing to bet, even though I didn't grow up in Indonesia, I'm willing to bet you also grew up with mothers or fathers who said, be careful who you hang around with, right? Guilt by association. Whoever you hang around with, that is how you're going to act, right? That's what my mom taught me. And so makes sense. We think, when we're young, it's like, come on, no, I want to hang out with the interesting people. Or I want to hang out with the people who are doing unskillful things, because the unskillful things are fun, right? these kind of things. But when we get older, when we get wiser, we understand, oh, man, if I hang out with this person, I'm going to end up, out drinking all night. I'm going to end up in the jail because we did something stupid, these kind of things. And you're like, I don't want to hang out with these kind of people anymore. Right? This is not you realize that it's actually more work, right? It's not as fun. It's not as pleasant to be around people who are like that. And I don't know, you call it my karma, call it, from past lives or whatever, but I've always believed in quality over quantity. Right? My father told me that my grandfather died when I was young, so I didn't get a chance to really talk to him a lot about these things, but I was told that my grandfather told my father that if you have only 3 or 4 good friends in your life, you can count yourself blessed. You can count yourself that you're lucky, right? And I always thought about that's very good advice. Right? What is a good friend? And what's a bad friend? Right? So I've had not that many friends in my life, but the friends I've had have always been good Kalyana Mittas. This is what I talk about. My best friend from lay life, Rafe, who I was a very important part of my late 20s and into my 30s. Right? I didn't know him since I was a child, but I met him when I was a young adult. And this is a person who I could spend hours talking about everything with. Right? We talked about philosophy and the world and science and the universe and all these kind of things. Right? And this is a person, even though we didn't believe the same things, right? We didn't necessarily agree on everything. We were Kalyana Mitta, right? He is in my lay life. He was my biggest Kalyana Mitta on my Buddhist path, right? Because he didn't become a Buddhist, right? He toyed with maybe becoming a monk and becoming a Buddhist later on, but that's not really his path. But he encouraged me in doing good. We encourage each other in acting skillfully. We encourage each other in doing good, right? He had his path, and I encouraged him on doing his goodness on his path, and I had my path, the Buddhist path, and he encouraged me. It's like, oh, that sounds great. It sounds like, I've noticed how much you're changing, and how much, more skillfully you're being, and how more happy you are, and all these things, right? And encourage me on this path. So for him, I feel very blessed that I have this person. I still talk to him to this day, on the Facebook every once in a while. He lives in California, and I live here on the East Coast, so I haven't seen him in years. But still, when we talk to each other, right, it's still all about our paths and how we're doing and how we can act skillfully and how we can do better, right? That is a person who's very important to your life, right? We've all had people, maybe you've had the experience. I worked in, child protective services, so I worked with people who had lots of, either drug problems or mental health problems, or came from households and, people who were very, very hard experiences, very unpleasant situations, right? And sometimes I would see my clients, I would see people, and they would try to better themselves. They would try to raise themselves up from their current situation. And that was always such a wonderful thing to see that. I tried to do my best to help that person, because that person was trying to do better, trying to do good, right? And that's such a wonderful, rare thing in the world, right? So you want to encourage that. But then I would see family members and friends, right? And they'd be like, oh, who's this person? They think they're better than us, right? They're trying to be better, and they would try to sabotage that person. They would try to bring that person down, right? That's not the kind of person you want in your life, right? That's a bala. That's a foolish person, Right? And this is not, a bala is not somebody who is mentally stupid, right? Who is not intellectual. Oh, I didn't go to high school, so I'm a bala. Right? That has nothing to do with this word, this term, bala. Right? Bala is a foolish person, a person who acts unskillfully. Right? You could have 5 PhDs and you could be the biggest bala on the planet. Right? So it has nothing to do with your education. Not at all. It has nothing to do with intellect. It has to do with virtue. It has to do with your qualities. It has to do with what you're aiming for. Right? A Kalyana Mitta is somebody who tries to help the best part of you come out. Who tries to help the best part of you to grow and to develop. Right? That's a Kalyana Mitta. A bala is somebody who tries to encourage the worst parts of you to come out. The worst parts of you to be in control. Right? That's not good. That's not skillful. Right? So, we have, at least as lay people, one of the great things I already told you about my best friend from Lay Life, Ray. As a lay person and as a Buddhist, when I became a Buddhist, even before, I've always been very picky with who I'm around. But once I understood, Kalyana Mitta and Bala, I was like, okay, I'm really going to make sure that I am only around Kalyana Mitta. Right? I really made sure that, okay, these are the people I want to be around. This is the culture, the nature that I want to be with. Kalyana Mittas. It doesn't matter. They could be Christian, they could be Muslim, they could be Buddhist, they could be Jewish, they could be Jain. It doesn't matter what the religion is, right? What matters is that a Kalyana Mitta wants to support you in acting skillfully, and growing, and being better, and doing good things. This is a good person, right? Kalyana Mitta is not, it doesn't say this person must believe in X, Y, Z, right? It says that this person is skilled in these qualities. Right? So this is very important. Right? So just don't think, well, all my Kalyana Mittas have to be just Buddhist people. No. Right? Like I tell you about my friend Rafe, he's not a Buddhist person. But he is a very spiritual person, a truth-seeking person, just like I was. I am, right? So, we can encourage each other, right? That's the importance of Kalyana Mitta. Right? So you can, as lay people, as monastic, you don't have too much of an option to determine if you're in a monastery with other monks. You can't say, this person's a Kalyana Mitta, I want to be around this person, or this person's a Bala, I don't want to be around that person, right? If you're in a community, then you're kind of stuck with who you're in the community, right? It's the same thing with your family. Like, some of us, we have family members, maybe we have family members who are Bala, right? We have family members who drag us down, right? Who encourage us to be unskillful, right? And we can't just say to those family members, you go away, I don't want to ever see you again, right? That's a hard thing. But we can set boundaries, right? We can determine how much time we want to be with that person, right? And we can also practice lots of metta, lots of compassion for that person too. Because again, when we're talking about Bala, we should never kind of develop this us versus them. Oh, those people are Bala. We never want to look down on other people because we call them Bala, right? So this is not something that, and neither is Bala like a eternal label. You don't say, oh, that person's a Bala, they've always been a Bala, and they'll always will be a Bala. No, we don't ever want to say that, right? Because, are you not a Bala? I'm a Bala, right? Sometimes, though, I try to be a good Kalyana Mitta. We all have Bala inside. We all have unskillfulness. We all have foolishness, because we're not arahants. We're not awakened yet. And that's okay. So we have Bala inside of us, just like we have Kalyana Mitta inside of us. So when we, in our interactions with others, we can think, am I being a good Kalyana Mitta? Or am I being a Bala? Am I being foolish? Am I being harmful? Right? This is a very important, very good thing to think about. to understand. Right? So this is very important because we are social beings. We are social creatures. Right? This is one of the misconceptions, at least Westerners that I know of have with like Buddhist monks. Like we think that Buddhist monks are supposed to be in the woods by themselves for 40 years like hermits. Right? But if you look at the early texts, that this is not the case. If you look at the early texts, you see that the Buddhist monks, while they did live outside, at least the forest-dwelling ones lived outside, they were still close enough to the town and the village. Every day they went in and to get their alms food and to talk Dhamma to the people, right? So they were still part of community. They were still part of the fourfold assembly, right? Women and men, monastics, women and men, lay people. Right? So it's very important. So the Buddha understood that we are social creatures. The Buddha understood that we need others. Right? So the Buddha, when talking about monastics, he says, the monastics, if you can act skillfully and practice well by yourself in the forest, then do so. If not, then remain in the Sangha. Be with other good Kalyana Mitta monks. Right? So the Buddha understands that we need each other. We need good, skillful friends. Good skill, as monks and as lay people. Right? This is how we grow. This is how we develop. Buddha understands that, okay, I'm around, I have all my friends, and we're all doing the same thing. We're all following the Noble Eightfold Path. Right? This is wonderful. We can all support each other. We can all encourage each other on the path. Right? And sometimes following the Noble Eightfold Path is the hardest thing a person can do. Going against the stream of all of our likes and our dislikes and our cultural, our cultural upbringing and our evolutionary upbringing. All of these things. When we practice the Noble Eightfold Path, we practice going against the stream. And we need good Kalyana Mittas. We need good teammates, good camaraderie, good friendship, good family. Right? I keep saying it, but I love the fact that this place is called the Buddhist Family of New York. I love that. Right? Family is not only who you're born with and from, but also your Kalyana Mittas, your good friends that come together who practice in the same way. And again, might not be that it's the same religion, right? But they practice skillfully. They practice trying to be skillful and beneficial in the world. Then you're Kalyana Mittas, right? That's very important. But also, it's also important you do share a connection with people who are doing the same exact thing as you, right? Buddhist monks can be, close to lay people, can even maybe in the lay person aspect of it be friends with lay people, but we live a different life. We can't really be as close to lay people as we would to other monastics, right? Other monastics who are living the same life that is quite different than most people, right? So you kind of share a bond. It's like soldiers in war, right? Soldiers in war go through experiences and share this bond that the rest of us can't understand, right? But we can encourage each other, whether you're a monastic or a lay person, we can encourage each other to practice well, to practice skillfully. And this is the importance of Kalyana Mitta, because we are social beings. This is how we know, even the days we don't want to do it. I don't want to do this. But then your friend says, let's go to the temple. All right, let's go to the forest to meditate. Let's do this, let's do that. And you say, okay, yeah, let's do it. We'll do it together. Right? Some people have said that when they meditate in a group with people, that they feel an energy. They feel a happiness, right? Admittedly, I don't feel that. The best place I can meditate is by myself in the woods somewhere, away from people. And then I feel such peace and energy and stuff. But there are people who really do have that feeling of being with other people or meditating. Our meditation and our practice is ours alone, right? Nobody else can do it for us. Nobody else can really know what's in our mind. But we can all encourage each other and practice together. right? I run an online Sangha community, and we do things like we read the sutras together and stuff. But what we also do is when somebody's about to meditate, they will tell each other, they say, I'm going to meditate. And so even though they're not looking at each other, they're not connected. It's not like they're with each other on video, but just the very fact that you know somebody else somewhere in the world is meditating at the same time, you get this feeling of camaraderie. Like, so somebody will type in, I'm going to meditate, right? And then other people will say, okay, I'll join you. And then afterwards they'll say, thank you for joining me. Like, so it's kind of like a community, a family, right? That we do this together, even though we're not even in the same country, even though we're not even in the same time zone, we can do this together. All right, so no matter where you can get that Kalyana Mitta, that good friendship, is very important. Right, very important. Because this is, as the Buddha says, if we have good Kalyana Mittas, then we can be expected to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. We can be expected to practice. Because sometimes we just don't have the willpower to do it. We just don't have the energy. Sometimes Mara, right? Mara has total control of us, and we need a friend to come in and reach out and grab us out and say, okay, come on, let's go practice. Let's do some dana. Let's practice some sila. Let's go meditate, right? That's very important because sometimes you just can't do it by yourself. That's one of the things that I realized actually as a monk. The last year or two, I realized like I need to be around lots of good Kalyana Mitta monks because I can't actually become awakened on my own, right? My ignorance, the force and the bala inside, the ignorance that I have inside, actually I need good community. I need good monks to be around to learn from, right? That's very important. And so that's why even monks have monasteries, right? Even monks come together, right? We tell each other our faults, right? We do our confessions, right? And that's not meant to be this goes also to a good point of what a Kalyana Mitta is, right? Good Kalyana Mitta monks would never judge you. They would never say you're like, oh, tell us what you did. It's not like about that. It's, I did this thing, I'm trying to be better, but I messed up. And they'd be like, okay, we understand, we support you, keep trying to be better, right? Thank you for confessing in this. It's good to confess that you did this act so that you can let it go and you can try to be better next time, right? So the Buddha says this is how you do it. And so this is the only confession in Buddhism is for monastics, but also though you can do what the Buddha says. The Buddha gives a 3-part way of how you grow in this Dhamma and discipline, right? So the first one is that if you've done something bad, you admit it that you've done something bad. You acknowledge your transgression, right? And you can do that, firstly, you have to do it to yourself, right? Because our minds, Mara in our minds, right, will come up with all kinds of justifications why we did this unskillful act. So we have to acknowledge, no, I did this unskillful act. We have to acknowledge our transgression. How it starts usually is somebody comes to the Buddha and they admit that they've done something wrong. And he goes, foolish man, yes, you have committed a transgression. Right? But you have what? The second step is, the first step is you acknowledge you've done this transgression. And so sometimes that means confessing to another person. Sometimes you have to go to a friend and say, listen, I did this, I'm sorry. Right? The second part is making amends for that action. So you make amends by apologizing, by, whatever. If you destroyed something, maybe you can replace it. You make amends, whatever way you can make amends, right? And then the third is to seek future restraint, meaning next time I'm going to do better, right? Have an honest, sincere, not that from here on in I will never make any mistakes ever again. That doesn't exist, right? Unless you're an Arahant, you're going to make mistakes. But you make an honest, sincere, let me try to do better next time. Let me try to figure out a better way of doing it next time. Right? And so the Buddha says, you have acknowledged your offense. You have made amends in accordance with the Dhamma and seek future restraint. This is how one grows in this Dhamma and discipline, right? So if you understand that, and you have good friends, good Kalyana Mitta, who have your back, because sometimes we can't see, we have all kinds of what we call blind spots, right? We can't see that we're acting stupid. We can't see that we're acting bala. But our friends, our good Kalyana Mittas can. And they can say, listen, you're acting in not a good such way. Maybe you can't see it, but I can. And I have your best interest in mind, right? A Kalyana Mitta is the best part of you to come out, to be better, right? So they will not judge you, right? They're trying to help you be better, right? So they will say, listen, you're not doing good, you should do this, right? And normally we don't like that. Well, who are you to, we get defensive. Who are you to tell me that I'm not doing something right? But the only exception to that is if we know that the person is not trying to harm us, right? If we know that the person is not trying to use our confession against us, right? They're going to go to another person, oh, you see what this person did, right? If we know that they're honestly sincere, good Kalyana Mitta, and that they're trying to help us, well then we won't feel that defensiveness. We're like, okay, thank you. I don't see this. Let me try to figure this out. And that's exactly what my friend Rafe and I did, right? We called each other on our BS. And that was such a wonderful thing to say, oh, okay, I know this person, because even if the defensiveness comes up, I know, all right, no. I know that Rafe, I know that this person, this Bante, whatever, really does sincerely have my best interest in mind. They really aren't trying to harm me or ruin my reputation. They're trying to help me get better. Let me listen to them, right? And then that's how we all get better, right? And you do the same for, you be the Kalyana Mitta for somebody else, right? This person knows that they trust you, that they know that you're not, trying to be harmful to them, and you can say, listen, I see this. This is my perception. I don't think you're doing the right thing here. You should try to do better this way, right? And they say, oh, thank you very much. I think you're right. Let me look, let me examine this. Let me contemplate this, right? So this is the importance of Kalyana Mitta. This is the importance of having community, having good friends, right? Who the Buddha says you should hold on to, right? There's very few things in the suttas that the Buddha says you should grasp on, right? Because most everything the Buddha says you should let go of. But anything that helps us lead towards the ending of our suffering, right? Anything that helps us, so like a good desire to practice Dhamma, that's good, right? Because it leads to the ending of our desires. A good desire to have good Kalyana Mittas, that's good, because it leads us to following the Noble Eightfold Path and ending our suffering, right? So the Buddha tells us to hold on to these. I respond to it. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes me a couple weeks. I'm not the best at responding to email, but but people have, if they see somebody who they think is going to be beneficial for them, they really do want to try to get as much from them as possible. And sometimes you have to realize that person only has a limited amount of energy and time, right? So you have to be, understanding of that, but still try to always make sure that you have the ability to be close to them, to listen to them, right? To watch how they act and to emulate them. That's just the Buddha says, to emulate a good Kalyana Mitta. That is a good thing. So friends, I think we have about a half hour left, so I'll leave that to questions and answers.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante. So the next sessions we're gonna open for question and answers. To those who has question and wants to ask it directly, you can do so by raising your hand by clicking on the features on raised hands on the bottom right corner of your device. If you're using cell phone, there's a 3 dots on the bottom right. If you click on it, you'll see there's a raise button features on the screen. If you're using a laptop or a computer, there's also a folder called Participants. You can click on it, and then there's a raise button feature that you can click, and then once we see anybody's with a raised hands on their name, we're gonna turn the audio to get it unmute, and you can ask the questions. So while we wait for the next participants to ask questions, I have a small question, Bante. You did mention about the Kalyana Mitta with different point of view, but still can be a good Kalyana Mitta. So let's say if that person who has completely different political point of view, and somehow you feel that his political view may harm or full of hatred of certain people or such as like that. Do you still consider that person as a Kalyana Mitta, Bante, or?
So one thing that has to be very important, I don't often delve into politics and things like this because I actually, as a layperson, was heavily involved in politics, and becoming a monk was a wonderful joy of letting it go. But something that's very important is to really investigate and understand and try to see if what their views are really what you think that their views are. Like, so these days it's very easy to, because everything is so polarized, it's very easy to think that somebody totally fits within a certain framework, and then everything that you think is part of that framework applies to that person, right? But in reality, it's very nuanced. In reality, people often don't, especially people who really try to investigate and really try to think, will have views that are very nuanced, not black or white, meaning that they might agree and believe in this thing, and then they don't agree and believe in that thing. So it's very hard for them to say that, to fit into, oh, you're that kind of a person. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, right? To investigate and to understand that point of view, right? And not to just listen to what other people say, but you have to investigate it for yourself. And you really think, okay, are they really being harmful, or are they not? Right? You have to that's the first thing, to really investigate. The second thing is, if they are really being harmful, they're actively trying to advocate for the harming of others, well, then that's not something that you want to emulate, right? Now, if they have a view of how things should be done in society, that their intention and their view, this is not to harm another person. This is just how the government or whatever should be done. But your view is that this will harm somebody. Well, then that's more in the realm of politics. That's more in the realm of, like, we have to try it to see if it actually will do it, because you don't know. That's kind of an abstract thing, right? So, like, there were plenty of people who would say that my views of politics would be like, oh, that would be so horrible, and these people would not be this people. But my view is like, oh, this would be good for people, and things like that, right? So it's not that the intention, you can have totally different views on how things should be done, right? But the intention behind them is still, this is how we think things would be better for the most amount of people, right? So you have to really question and investigate that first. Then, if they are acting skillful, if they're advocating for skill, like for instance, like in the monks' rules, right? One of the parajikas, or it's one of the rules of you're not a monk anymore, is that I would kill a human being. But that's only part of it. If I said it is good to go kill people, and somebody kills somebody, then that is also a parajika, right? So I'm supporting it. I'm saying it is good that you should take your own life, or it's good that you should whatever, right? That is encouraging that. Then that's not a Kalyana Mitta, that's not somebody who's encouraging you to do something skillful, right? You should encourage, you go take out these people. These people, they don't believe how they do, we do, we should, there's lots of, even today in politics, there's people who, they'll show up to people's houses and threaten their children and do, it's not good what people are doing, in politics today. But, and that's, when you can see that somebody's actually acting unskillful, then you can say, okay, well, maybe they are misguided. But you can also say, for the most part, this person is encouraging me to do skillful things, right? And then they, are not encouraging me to do unskillful things, but they have some views that really kind of don't fit my views. But then you can still kind of accept that, okay, well, they are for my best interest. They just have a view of what my best interest is that's different than my own. Right? So that's important. The intention and the desire is important. Because it's also it's very easy for some, people will say, like, I have such and such compassion, and this is the best way of doing things, and these people don't have any compassion, they just want to harm people, etc., right? And you have that view, but you don't know if that view is actually correct, right? And so that's actually unskillful. That's not good either, right? So you have to really kind of investigate, is this person acting skillfully? Do they encourage me to act skillfully, or do they not encourage me to act skillfully? And if they're not encouraging me if they're encouraging me to act unskillfully, then that is a person that I should not emulate, right? That's a person. Even that person might even believe exactly what I believe, agree with everything I agree, but they don't act skillfully, and they don't encourage me to act skillfully. Well, then that's a person I don't want to be around, right? Because that's not a person who's going to help me grow, right? Because we all believe the same thing. We don't, that's not a person. This is why actually it is important to be around people who have different views, because they challenge you on your views, right? This Buddha talks about our views as a tangle, right? Our views. It is because of our views that we take up swords, right? It is because of our views that we cause so much strife in the world, right? So being able to be a bit more flexible and a bit more loose with, holding on to our views actually is part of the Buddhist practice, right? So we instead of this person doesn't have our views, so that automatically they must be a bad person, right? That's not a good way of living, because that, like I said, I'm an anthropologist. I studied all people all over the world, right? It's so easy to say, oh, this person, they're from a different country, they don't have our views, right? And just throw them in this, this mental bin, right? But I don't know that person. I haven't talked to that person. I don't know who they are, what they believe, and I don't know how listening to what they believe can actually help me grow as a person, right? So it's a very nuanced and complicated thing. It's not a direct answer like this person, I think that this person is, advocating harm, so then, I don't have anything to do with them. Really try to investigate first. Is this really their intention? Is this really what they're doing? And if it is, then you can say, oh, okay, maybe I want to avoid this person, right? So it's very important to break through, the initial layers to really understand a person, right? Because that's how if not, then you kind of throw people away, right? You just throw you put people into, like a person committed a crime. They're a criminal for the rest of their lives, right? Is that really the best way to look at a person? Even Angulimala, Angulimala, the Buddhist serial killer, even Angulimala could become a monastic and become awakened, right? Are we going to say that person is horrible, unskillful? We're never going to, they're always going to be this way? That's not a good way of thinking. That doesn't help you and your mind, and it doesn't help the other person either. So it should be done very wisely, skillfully, and investigating and understand. And then truly, if this person is unskillful, unbeneficial, then you say, okay, I'm going to set my boundaries and limit my time with that person.
Okay. Thank you, Bante. Alright, bagi teman-teman yang ingin bertanya secara langsung, bisa menggunakan fitur angkat tangan. Dan bila ada yang mau pertanyaannya diwakilkan, juga bisa diketik di comments box. Nanti bisa kita bacakan. Okay. It looks like calls have a direct questions, Bante. Call, yes, you can go ahead, call. You can press the unmute button, call on the bottom left. Got it? All right. Go ahead, call. Yes.
Okay, I turned on a little bit late, and I'm just curious. There are 3 words that you mentioned that I'm not familiar with. I'm not going to take up your time to ask you the literal translation. But can you give me the spelling of these words so I can look up the literal translation? The first one is bala.
So Pali is one of those languages where the line over a letter can change the definition of the meaning, right? So you have to, I believe the full Bala is B, A with the line over it, the diacritic, L-A. So if you just look up B-A-L-A, that actually is like a power, like a spiritual power. So one way of saying Bala is like a really good thing, a spiritual power, and the other way of saying Bala is a fool. So you have to make sure that you have the right diacritics for that.
The other one is Kalyana Mitta.
So I think, I don't know, I don't think there's any diacritics in Kalyana, Kalyana, Mitta. Although that's such a famous word, if you just Google that, you'll get plenty of stuff on that.
Okay, and the last one is Mara, M-A-R-A.
Oh, Mara, I don't think that has a diacritic. Yeah, just M-A-R-A.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
If there's nothing else, we can end early. That's fine.
Yeah. Any more questions, guys? Jasmine, Stella? No?
And this is a pretty basic. It's a pretty basic topic, but it's a topic that we think. There's often times when we think, oh yeah, I know this, but we really don't, right? Because we don't act. We think we know, but then we act differently, right? We don't try to have lots of Kalyana Mitta. So I understand, it's a topic that won't have much questions,
yeah.
But it's a topic that we should think about and reflect on often.
So, Bande, to follow up my conversation with you last time. Oh, there's a quick. Oh, okay. It looks like either Julius or Fang from Toronto will have a question. Has a question.
I would like to ask for your suggestion for the kids or teenagers who have not developed sadha or confidence to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha about the peer pressure. And as we know, the Buddhism is against the karma, which is worldly things.
I think I need some clarification on that. Could you say that again, please?
Yes. Would you like to suggest for the kids or teenager who has developed their sadha or confidence about the Buddha Dhamma and Sangha about the peer pressure?
For children?
Yes.
Oh, teenager.
For the peer pressure.
Well, this is a tough one, right? This is very tough because, especially when they become a teenager, right? There's a point in child development where the peers, the friends, are more important than the parents, right? Because they're going to listen to the friends more than the parents, right? And so part of being a child, part of being a human, is making mistakes, right? So as a parent, you might say, oh, this friend of my child, they're not a good person, right? But what happens? I mean, I don't know if this is the same for every person, but I'm growing up and even today, I have a big contrariness in my mind. If somebody tells me to do something, I want to do the exact opposite. I was like, oh, you think you're telling me what to do? I'm going to do the opposite, right? And so kids will do that. You know, like it's in America at least, it's a big kind of trope, or look, or like it's a common thing. Like you tell that your person, your child, don't hang out with that person or don't date that person. And what are they going to do? They're going to hang out with that person and they're going to date that person, right? Because part of that teenage years especially is they're challenging. They're going against authority, right? So what I would suggest is, instead of worrying about the individual actions, like don't hang out with this person, what I would suggest is, especially from a young age, to talk about the kind of person that you should be with, the kind of person you should hang out with, right? Talk about that to them, right? Explain, even if you have a good person, you say, see Uncle such and such or whatever, they encourage us to do this, they encourage us to do that. Talk to them about that. Talk in general terms about the type of people they should be around, right? And that will be with them, right? That will, you explain, well, and then when they're young, they might say, well, why should I not be around that person? And you give them good, valid answers. Don't be, like, I love my mother, but, a lot of times, when I would question, but I would answer, she says, because I said so, right? And I said, well, that doesn't help me. Like, tell me why. Explain to me why I shouldn't do this, right? And, maybe I'm a young person and I might not fully understand it like an adult would, but still, talk to me and explain to me why I shouldn't do this so I can at least process it. As somebody who worked with hundreds of children and, 10, 15 years of different careers working with children understand a lot more than we give them credit for, right? We really think that, when they're like 9 or 10, that we should still try to talk to them like they're like young children. No, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old especially, you can start talking to them like an adult. You can start, obviously, not fully like an adult. You have to kind of understand how much a 9 or a 10-year-old can really understand. But still, talk to them straight, explain to them, train them in understanding. This is how good people should be, and these are the kind of people who you should have around you, right? And I, as somebody, again, one of the things that my parents did do right, among many things, was to teach me the type of people, like the story I said in the beginning about how my dad talked about how my grandfather would say, the kind of a good friend, right? And you should expect that. Very rare to have a good friend, right? Most of the people are not going to be good friends. They're not going to be, in America, one of the things we say in terms of a good friend is somebody who will actually help you move. Like if you have to move a house, most people will be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be around, right? So a good friend is actually somebody, and the Buddha says this too. A good friend is somebody who will support you in hard times. Right? That's a good friend. So if you grow up understanding this, then you won't need, your parents to be like, that's not a good person, right? Because you will have what we call inculcated. You will have understood this. You have understood, and then you make the judgment for yourself, right? Oh, okay. Well, even though I have lots of compassion for this person, and I like this person, but they're really not the best for me. Maybe I shouldn't hang out with them as much, right? And so you have, as a parent, you kind of have to have trust that the good things you've taught your kids will have stuck, right? If you really try to encourage your children and to teach them to understand that this is how you should act, well then okay, I'm going to trust my child. And especially, they're going to go through periods of time where they're going to be stupid, just like I did, right? You reflect, oh, when I was a kid, I did lots of stupid things too, right? But if you trained them and taught them well, then you can encourage, then you can say, you know what, my kid, they're going to make mistakes, but I know that in the end, they're going to be okay, right? Because because I taught them, they've grown up to be good kids, right? They learned, they understand. And so, even though there's peer pressure, right? Even though, you know, the other kids might say, well, you know, do this, do that, then they will be able to, even if they go with the peer pressure, still at a certain point, they'll say, no. This is too far. I'm done here. Right, growing up, I remember like there was lots of peer pressure. Like growing up in the 80s in America, there was lots of like, don't do drugs, say no to drugs, right? So they talked a lot about peer pressure, right? And you know, and I don't know, I could be an abnormal person in many ways. I think I am, but like I never peer pressure when it comes to stuff like drugs and stuff. I kind of knew, I'm like, I'm not going to bother with this. Why should I do this? It's just going to hurt me, you know. Like, and even as I got older, I was like, I already have a drug. It's called eating, right? I like eating, and that's my addiction. So I don't need to do, you know, all these kind of drugs, whatever my friends would say this or that, you know. So teaching your kids and I never really actually had a lot of friends who were into doing a lot of drugs and doing a lot of bad things, right? Because I kind of was trained from an early age, this is the kind of person you want to be around, right? And I also had good role models of that too. Good family members and friends of the family and stuff like that. So there comes a point where you have to, as a parent, trust that you've done the best job that you can and that your child will actually make a good decision, right? And that's hard. It's hard to do that. But if you're always trying to control the child, they're always going to rebel. And they're not going to really learn. What are they going to learn? They're going to learn what you should do is try to control another person. And that's not going to help them in their relationships with other people. It's not going to help them when they get married. It's not going to help them when they have children, right? Because what they learned was control. They learned to control. Instead, what you want them to learn is this is how we learn, this is how we understand good things, and then we trust in the people we love to do the good things, understanding that they will also make mistakes. That's normal, right? But you can also teach them that if they're trying to really do good and you make mistakes, and you support them and you're there for them and you encourage them, you're also teaching them that good people will also help a person who's done a bad thing, right? They say, even though you've done a bad thing, we know that your heart and your intention is this, and we're going to support you to do better, right? So it's hard to trust. But if you believe that you've taught your children in a good way, and that they are smart enough and they understand what they've been taught, then it's time to let go, right? Obviously, if it's something very serious, then you have to get involved. But if it's just with their friends or whatever, let go, let them understand, let them make their mistakes, and be there for them, encourage them to be better, right? So that's what I'll have to say about children. I love kids. I've never had any of my own. I helped raise my nephew from the time he was 1, so I have a little bit of experience with that in my career. But I'm a big advocate for kids, and I think kids are much smarter than we give them credit for, and that they're much wiser if they're trained well, right? If they have good parents who train them well, then they're much wiser than we give them credit for as well.
Thank you, Bante. Thank you, Fang. So the next question is actually a direct question, Bante, from Anthony. Anthony, you can unmute. Go ahead, Anthony.
What's your question, buddy?
What if you become friends with someone and at first you think they will be your friends, but they will be only a fake friends? How do you deal? What do you say to separate from them?
Oh, that's a hard question. That's a very hard question. Well, the first thing that we should understand is no matter how we say it, no matter what we try to think about their feelings, try to think about the best way to say it, we have to understand that, especially if they're very attached to us, very connected to us, that they're going to be sad about it, that they're going to kind of get angry about it, right? That they're going to kind of lash out and be mean even, right? So we have to expect that. We have to understand that, right? Because this is a person just like us who has feelings and emotions, and so we have to understand that it's not going to be nice, right? It's not going to be a pleasant thing, right? It's going to be even sad for us. We even might feel that we kind of even though we know it's not the best for us not to be around them, we still might like them, and we have memories, like we played video games together, we rode our bikes together, all these kind of things, right? So we're going to even be sad too. So we have to expect that right off the bat. We have to expect that it's not going to be a fun, pleasant experience. And then we should understand, the best thing to do is to talk to them directly. Because what most people don't want to be involved in conflict. So instead what they'll do is they just won't talk to them anymore, right? They won't respond to emails, they won't respond to phone calls. But that's not a nice thing to do. That doesn't really give the person any closure, right? It doesn't really give them any understanding as to what happened, right? And so then they're just like, that person was a jerk. They just stopped talking to me. That's not nice, right? Well, you should try to do the best that you can to tell them and understand, listen, this is not us being together is not good for me. It doesn't help me. That your actions are not good for me to be around. And I need for us to not be friends anymore, right? And again, that person might be angry and this and that. They might not like it. But maybe, you know what? Maybe a year down the road or whenever, they might think, that person was really good, nice to me. They were really good to me that they told me that I wasn't acting very good. That person actually was a better friend than I ever had. I should be more with that person, right? And then they come back to you and they apologize and they say, listen, thank you for saying this, and nobody ever told me this before, and I didn't understand, but now I do. Can you please forgive me? Can we be friends again? And you say, oh, okay, yes. Let's try. And then they also know that if they act unskillfully, because you did it before, you're gonna say, listen, you're not doing that. I gave you another shot, I gave you another chance, but you're still acting this way. It's best that we're not friends anymore, right? So being open and honest and forward, while might not feel, it's not going to feel nice, it's actually the best thing you can do for the person. It's the most compassionate thing you can do for the person. We think out of compassion, no, I don't want to say anything bad to this person, they'll feel bad. But actually that's not helping. Right? It's just like with parents. When you do something bad, so sometimes your parents yell at you, or sometimes your parents feel disappointed, or your parents feel sad, right? That's good, right? Because you understand, oh, this wasn't a good thing. If you go out and do something bad and your parents are like, hey, that was really nice, that doesn't help you, right? Your parents are to try to help you to be the best kind of person you can be, right? And so your friends should do that as well, right? But your friends are just like you. Your friends don't know any better. They're just trying to, guess what? Here's a secret for the kids. Even as adults, sometimes we don't know any better, right? So that's why we need to be around good people too. Same thing with kids. Kids should try to be around good people, right? And so we should learn from an early age how to skillfully stand up for ourselves, skillfully make sure that we're around good, skillful people and not unskillful people. Okay? So I hope I tried to, I hope that was as understandable as it could be for such a hard subject.
Okay, thank you, Bante. I think this is gonna be the last question, Bante. Before we close with blessing or with sharing meditator. This is a question from the administrator at Indonesian Temple in California, Bante. I just gonna edit it a little bit. As a lay people, can we advise a monk and how? Assuming the monk not doing the right thing.
Yes. Okay. Well, actually, one of my talks coming up is actually going to cover this because Jolia, one of the community members here, actually asked if I could give a talk on like monastic vinaya and lay people dealing with monks and things like that. So this is actually a very important thing. One of the things that you don't find in the early texts and in the monastic vinaya is something that is very common in Buddhist countries. It's very important that I don't, because I'm a Westerner, I wasn't born Buddhist. It shouldn't be that Westerners try to teach Buddhist people how they should be Buddhist. That's very important that we should understand that this is not what we should do. Right? But if you look at the early texts, if you look at the Vinaya, then you understand actually this has nothing to do with culture. Right? This is actually how the Buddha laid things down. This is how things should be. Right? And so if you look at those early texts, what you see is a much closer relationship between monks and lay people than today. Like a more egalitarian, like today it's kind of like this. Monks are up here and lay people are down here, right? And one of the things that really kind of scared me a little bit, I guess you would say, was I was a monk just only maybe a couple months, maybe a year, and there was a lay person, a Westerner. Most Westerners are not Buddhist, right? Most Westerners who come to Buddhist temples and Buddhist, they might be Buddhist in the future, but they're kind of exploring and they're learning. And so we had a person who stayed with us who wasn't a Buddhist person. He was very eclectic. He was into all kinds of different things, right? And I was talking to a Sri Lankan lady, a very wonderful Sri Lankan lady who's a supporter. She lives just in New Jersey. She's a wonderful person. The person who was living with us, he came and he called me Jay, right? He just said, "Hey Jay," right? He didn't say Bante Jay or anything like that. And of course, the Sri Lankan person was like, "Whew," and she wasn't. She, out of a concern for his welfare and his karma, she started to say, "Oh, it's best not to say Bante. You should say Bante and such and such." But she said something that was really scary to me a little bit. She said, you should always listen to the monk, and even if they're hitting you, you should say, "Yes, Bante, okay, Bante," right? And I was like my mouth dropped, and I was like, whoa, this is not good. And I spoke to another person from, a Buddhist country online, on Facebook, right? And she told me about how the monk who is at the village, she's in a small village in a Buddhist country, and the monk who's at the temple there drinks alcohol and is very abusive to people and things like that. And she was talking to me about how it took them a long time, but the villagers are now coming together to say, this is not a good monk. We shouldn't have this monk here. We should get a better monk, right? So there's this ingrained thing where we should not say anything bad about the monks, right? And that's not necessarily a good thing. But on the other hand, I've seen this online, there are people who are lay people who say, this monk should have, you're not following such and such a rule, and you're not following this, and you're not following that. And that's not exactly skillful either, because especially since I've become a monk, I've realized, oh, okay, this person, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They really don't. I mean, they just, from their culture, from what they were raised, or from whatever, they think this is how it should be. But actually, maybe they don't understand the full nuances and things like that. And so, like, on my online community, I will teach people about the Vinaya. But there are some monks that don't like that. They say you shouldn't really teach lay people a lot about the Vinaya because they'll misunderstand things, and then they'll start judging you about things and they don't understand. And so there is a balance. I fully understand that there is a balance, right? So one of the important things is you should understand the Buddha gives a criteria for when a monk should admonish another monk. And one of those is that first you understand that you are not also guilty of the same thing that you're trying to tell the monk of what they shouldn't do. The other is that you should do it with a mind of metta, right? Not with a mind of like a fault-finding mind. Like your intention is to really go after that person. That person is this and that, and you're looking for every little thing. That's not the best thing to do, right? Because that's not good intention. Right? That's not a good intention because you're trying to find every little fault in that person. Right? I understood this as well because this is part of me. Like, I came as a Westerner, I was like, because I studied the Vinaya for years even before I became a monk, because when I knew I wanted to become a monk, I was like, I need to study this, I know exactly. But then I started to learn, like, oh, monks in Thailand and Buddhist countries, they handle money? I'm like, oh, that's horrible. Like, I had those are not real monks, and monks and this, they do that? I can't believe that, right? And so I had these kind of judgments, right? But now I understand, you know what? If that's what they do, that's what they do. I don't want to do that, right? I don't think that's the most skillful thing. The most skillful thing is to follow the rules as laid down, right? But even I, as a monk, especially when I've traveled, like I've been stranded places, like I had to use money because I thought I didn't have to. I was late to a bus to go, to 4 states away, and then, I was like, okay, well, this money, but they're like, no, you need to pay it in cash. I'm like, I'm a monk, what do I get? So even I've had to break rules, and I understand, like, sometimes that there's times where you have to, but in general, I don't want to have to do this, right? Like, there's places like at, ordinations and stuff. It's a kind of a tradition, and I kind of, as a layperson, and I grew up Italian, and I know this in many cultures, like, if people come to your event, like a wedding or whatever, you actually give them some money. You give them like a thank you gift, right? So it's the same thing, like when monks come to an ordination, you actually get like a little donation, like in an envelope. And when I was first, I didn't know what this was. So I picked it up and I opened it. I was like, money. It's like, oh, okay. Like, And so thankfully I've had layperson like, can you take this? Like, I'm a monk. I shouldn't handle money. But that's part of the tradition. And is it the best thing? No. So what I've learned is, what I understand to do and what my practice is, I encourage and understand and try to encourage and reflect what's the best good thing to do, right? I could get all worked up in the weeds about all these bad monks and all these bad things they do and all this stuff like that, but that doesn't really help me, right? It doesn't really, it just puts more negativity, more ill will in my mind, right? More judgment, more fault finding, right? So this is important. So if you have to deal with the monastic, right? So what I would say is, like, if you're going to a place and you realize, oh, the monastic's not a good person, even like in the last couple of years, lots of like stuff has come out of like Buddhist teachers and different, like in Zen and different places. You don't hear about it too much in Theravada, but it does exist. Don't think that it's not in Theravada as well. Of Buddhist teachers doing bad things, and then it's coming out, right? You say, oh, I can't believe this. This is so horrible, right? One of the things that's important that I like about Theravada is that there's no like guru-ness. There's no like, we should totally worship and just totally listen to this person, right? actually, if you read the suttas, you understand, no, you should not just put you should say, this is the only person I'm going to listen to. No, you should listen to different teachers, different perspectives, different understandings, and then you can understand, okay, this person, I think this person is monk, he's acting in a very skillful way. I want to have this person, right? So I don't follow just one monk. I actually have a team. I have about 4 or 5 monks, senior monks, Ajahns and Bhantes, that I like, okay, this is a person I want to emulate, right? So if I have a problem with a monk, what I will do is actually, I'll go to these other monks, I'll say, you know what is your perspective on this they're doing this, they're getting involved in that, I'm not a big fan of that, what's your perspective on that? So this is what I encourage you to do, right? If you have trouble with a monk, go talk to other monks about it, right? Try to think about what's the most skillful way to do it first, right? Don't just go and confront that monk right off the bat. Talk to a bunch of different monastics about it, right? And even possible, maybe even monastics from different traditions, or even possible, maybe like I'll talk to a Thai monastic and a Western monastic and a Burmese monastic, like, even to get a more wide perspective, right? And then you might understand, oh, okay, I understand how this monk is acting. I don't think it's the most skillful thing, but they're not horrible. They're not an evil person, right? Or maybe, okay, this is a monk I don't want to have anything to do with, right? But so you talk to who you think are wise people first, right? Try to think about what's the most skillful, wise thing to do first, and then you do it, right? So and then maybe the best thing is that you don't confront the person. Maybe you don't have the skills or the ability to do it in the right way, but maybe you spoke to a monk, and that monk says, okay, I'll handle this, right? Maybe I can talk to this person in a more skillful way, right? So it depends. It should be done with a mind of metta, right? With a mind of compassion, understanding that monks are people too, right? This is one of the things that is a misconception, right? And I often put it in this way. You don't become perfect and then you become a monk. You become a monk to become perfect, right? And I can be fully, if I wanted to, I could be fully jaded, because as a Westerner, I thought like all monks were like Ajahn Chah in the woods, and everybody's, monks are so wonderful and this and that. And like, I've come to like, now I'm a monk and I realize actually it's like the opposite. Like, whoa, actually the really good ones are pretty rare. Like, let me look, let me try to find these really good ones and emulate them as much as possible, right? It's the same thing with lay people, right? Really good ones are really rare. A person is a person, right? And so, in many ways, it's better to focus on the skillful. It's better to focus on who's the most skillful and I should go towards them, rather than this person's doing this bad thing, and because that's not helping you. And it's not helping them. They're not going to be like, I see the light, I'm going to be better. No, so you focus on what's the most skillful, what's the most beneficial. You focus on the teachers, who are to you acting the best. Learn from them, listen to them, be around them, right? Because if you try to go after everybody who's not acting the best, you could spend your whole life, multiple lifetimes doing that, and you won't get anywhere, right? So try to talk to other wise people about the situation. Think about how, try to figure out, even with them, what is the best thing you should do. And then you reflect on it, and then you act in that way. Okay? But keep in mind that monks are people too, right? They shouldn't be raised on a pedestal. And maybe that's how it is these days, but that's not really how it was in the early texts. You can see that, right? So monks are people too. You should have compassion for them, metta for them, and even when they do bad things, right? Because that's what we have confession every 2 weeks. That's what we're for, because we understand that we're going to break rules. We're not perfect, right? So we can help each other get better, right? And so just like a monk can help a layperson be better and be a Kalyana Mitta to the layperson, guess what? a layperson could be good Kalyana Mitta to a monk too, right? That's important, right? So that's important. We can be Kalyana Mitta to each other, and that's important. So I guess that's the end of my question.
Thank you so much, Bante. Alright, it looks like we already passed 11 o'clock, Bante, so
No problem.
you want to do a quick blessing first, Bante?
Oh,
Or-
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said.
Let's do the blessing
yeah,
first.
Yeah, just a quick one, I guess.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I don't know.
I'm sorry to put it on the spot.
No worries. Okay, so we'll do the normal blessing then. Sabitio vivajantu sabarogo vinasatu mate bhavatvantarayo sukhiti kayuko bhava abhivadana silissa nityam buddha pachayano chattaro dhamma vadanti ayuvanno sukham balang bhavatu sabba mangalang rakantu sabba devata Sabba Buddha Nubhavena, Sabba Dhamma Nubhavena, Sabba Sangha Nubhavena, Sada Sotte Bhavantu Te, Dukkha Patta Chanit Dukkha, Bhaya Patta Chanit Bhaya, Sukha Patta Chanit Sukha, Antu Sabbe Pipaniyo.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Then now we're gonna close with Namakara. Thank you, Bante. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivadeni Sang Bhagawa yang Maha Suci yang telah mencapai penerangan sempurna, aku bersujud di hadapan Sang Buddha, Sang Bhagawa. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Dhamma telah sempurna dibabarkan oleh Sang Bhagawa. Aku bersujud di hadapan Dhamma. Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Sangha siswa Sang Bhagawa telah bertindak sempurna. Aku bersujud di hadapan Sangha. Sabe sata bhavantu sukhitata. May all beings be happy. Semoga semua makhluk hidup berbahagia. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Selanjutnya, we're gonna give you a respect. Okasa wanami pande. Thank you, Bante. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and may you have a very good day and enjoy your weekend. See you again next week. Bye.
The last question is really good, Rabbi.
So we can use that as a topic for next week too, if you want.
Yeah, and also how to handle the fact mom one day.
What's that?
How to handle the fact mom. If you come from the fact mom, so what should you do?
For what?
Fact mom. Fact
Oh,
mom.
fake
Oh,
mom.
the fake mom.
Oh.
Yeah, like nowadays, like if you like every single big city, they have like fact mom.
Yeah. Well, there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
You know, well, I mean, you could, you know, if they come up to you, you could say, I recognize you as a fake monk, and then just walk away.
Yeah.
You know, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, it's quite late.
Yeah.